Alright, we're going to take a quick look at some other aspects of the Qin Dynasty beyond their embracing of legalism. So as we explore classical civilizations in China, the Han Dynasty in particular, I thought we'd just quickly look at the Qin Dynasty, which came just before the Han. Alright, the first emperor of China, as we learned earlier, is successfully using legalism to conquer and unite all of China, and he unified and ruled China from 221 to 206 BC. Right? And we know he was ruthless, he burned books, he buried scholars alive, but he also did some other positive things as well. So let's take a look at them. First of all, here is the actual dynasty itself in terms of its size. He's quite famous for having extended and connected different walls together to form the Great Wall of China. And of course, he ended the Warring States period by unifying all the other warring states together into one big dynasty, the Qin. So, first of all, we know he completed the Great Wall. But be careful, what you think is the Great Wall isn't necessarily the wall that he built. You can see here is a picture on the far left over here. You can see the Qin Dynasty wall from 221 to 206 BC. This is actually a picture of the Han Dynasty wall from 206 to 220. Okay, and then this is the Ming Dynasty wall, which was built between 1368 and 1644. So we need to be careful. When most of us think of the Great Wall, we think of this one on the far right, but that's really the Ming Dynasty wall. Now, granted, it's still a very impressive structure, but it's not the wall that the Qin Dynasty would have built. In fact, most of the walls that would have been built during the Qin Dynasty look like this today. They're made of ram-packed dirt, and many have suffered either erosion or decay, but they're not the same wall that we're used to seeing. So you need to understand that there have been lots of walls in ancient Chinese history. Not all of them are as impressive as the existing Great Wall we see today outside of Beijing, which is really a Ming Dynasty wall. Okay, he also standardized the following things. Writing. So when the Qin Dynasty came to power, because there were different warring states, many different states had their own system of writing. We also know over time that Chinese writing has changed. So on the far left over here we have Oracle Bone script. We see what Shang Dynasty script looked like in the middle, and then the Qin Dynasty changed the script to look as it does here on the far right. Now, having standardized writing was really a good idea because people throughout China spoke different dialects of Chinese. But even today, people in China all write the same characters. At least they do in mainland China. And so that being able to read the same characters makes it so that people could communicate with each other even if they didn't speak the same dialect. He also standardized the monetary system as well. So again, during the Shang Dynasty, there were lots of different coins and shapes of coins and values for money. And in the Qin Dynasty, they standardized the money so that everybody was using the same type of money. They also standardized weights and measures. So again, if you want to be able to go to the marketplace and buy a particular amount of goods, having a standardized system of weights and measures makes it so that people can actually do commerce. They know how much goods are worth. They know how much that they can trade for or barter for them. It keeps the marketplace honest. Okay, he also standardized axle widths on carts. And this was important. Most people don't usually think about this, but if everybody had different widths of axles on the old dirt roads, what would happen is eventually the roads would have ruts in them. But if everybody's axle widths are different, there'll be different widths of ruts all throughout the roads. So the problem with that is it would make the roads unusable. It would really hurt and damage the roads in the long term. But if everybody has the same axle width, then their wheels all would have to ride in the same ruts. That's going to preserve the roads and make it so that the roads can be used to transport people more quickly and more efficiently. Okay, so we see here that they repaired and extended both roads and canals. Now the road system wasn't completed so that people could go on vacations. It was to facilitate trade. It was also used so that you could move your troops from one part of the empire to the other without too much difficulty. The Grand Canal, which would eventually stretch from northern to southern China, was also started during this time period. Again, the use of canals meant that you could transport goods and food more efficiently, particularly food produced in southern China along the canals to northern China, which means you wouldn't have to build large ships to go along the coast, which is a lot more dangerous because of bad weather and pirates. The canals make it more efficient to move and transport not just goods, but also people. Alright, now one of the other things that the first emperor did was build a very elaborate tomb system. Most of his tomb is still being investigated archaeologically, but you can see in the bottom right picture here, this is in fact what the tomb looks like pretty much today. It's covered in an open area. It's covered with an orchard. I believe it's an orange orchard. But it's a big tourist attraction today. And what people believe is under this sort of mountain. This is not really a mountain. It's really a pyramid that would have been perhaps the structures that you see illustrated up above, which has been long since underground. Now, in addition to his tomb, he also filled his tomb with thousands of terracotta soldiers. Now, this terracotta army, which was located underground back in the 1970s, is not exactly in the same place as the tomb we saw in the previous slide, but it's located very close by. But this is one of the archaeological wonders of the world. It's really impressive. It's unbelievable how they could have built really a life-size army. The statues are life-size. Every single one of them has a different head. They're stamped with their rank and their name on the back of their heads. But it's actually a great find because it tells us a lot about what their army would have looked like, the kinds of clothes they would have worn, how they would have formed their army, the types of weapons they would have used. So this is probably one of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever. And it's an enormous size pit, and it's one of only 3 that have been excavated, and there are still others that are believed to be in the area. So you got to understand that the first emperor, although he did very good things, such as building roads and canals and making the wall, but in fact he also sort of spent a lot of the money building this elaborate tomb, and he forced people to work on many of these projects. In the end, the dynasty only lasted 15 years, which may be the result of his harsh rule, but also that he spent too much of the money on these elaborate projects like tombs and wall building, and not enough on caring for the needs of common people. And as we've seen with the Mandate of Heaven, if a good emperor doesn't act moral, ethical, and good, and take care of the needs of the people, then they will lose the Mandate of Heaven, the peasants might rebel, and they might overthrow the dynasty. And in fact, the Qin Dynasty only lasts 15 years. Much of what you see here would have been destroyed by either an invading army or uprising peasants, and that marked the end of the Qin Dynasty. Very different than the Han Dynasty, will go on to last 400 years.